All right, I would like to begin my speech today by thanking my judges, my partner, and of course our opponents for making this such a fun debate so far. The motion for us today is Keynesian economics has failed. And what stands so far today is a proposition case and an opposition case. And what I intend to do in my speech is go over first some technicalities of the debate, some of the definitions and such, and then move and address, reinforce, if you will, the proposition case, and then go and refute the opposition case. So our definition, I would like to point out, for Keynesian economics is the use of government stimulus and monetary policy to stimulate demand and offset recessions. And they pointed out that one of the key tenets of Keynesian economics is countercyclical spending, where in recessions you spend more to stimulate the economy, and in economic booms you spend less. And what I'd like to point out is in the definition of Keynesian economics itself, simple spending to stimulate, when the purpose of spending is to stimulate the economy, is to stimulate demand and to offset recessions. This in itself is Keynesian economics. Countercyclical spending is just a method of implementation. As the opposition teams, perhaps a more effective method of implementation, but over the 60 years that we've used Keynesian economics, this has not been the way we've implemented Keynesian economics. We've implemented Keynesian economics simply to stimulate the economy and stimulate demand, not necessarily during recessions or booms. So I'd like to point that out. The second thing I would like to point out is that the opposition team is under the impression that we're arguing for some fanciful, idealistic free market economic system, which, if we look at the motion, we are not at all upholding a free market economic system. We're just arguing for why Keynesian economics has failed and providing examples. So again, any free market language is not at all weighty in this debate. All right, so our first point is that if Keynesian economics is working, we would have not seen over the last 60 years 9 recessions. And as the purpose of Keynesian economics is to stimulate demand, and this demand would purposefully offset recessions. And if we've seen 9 recessions in the last 60 years, that Keynesian economics has dominated United States federal government fiscal policy, we would have not seen this. And they pointed out that the Great Depression was a great example where it worked. And again, we're not even talking about the Great Depression. The Great Depression happened in the 40s, way more than 60 years ago. Keynesian economics has a lot to get there. Please sit down. Keynesian economics over the last 60 years has been in implementation. We've seen recessions in the 50s, in the 70s, and late 80s. All of these has, with Keynesian economics in place, Keynesian economics has not at all offset these recessions. Theoretically, if Keynesian economics was successful, these recessions would have never, ever occurred. And secondly, let's see. I will take your point now.
As in your definition, the purpose of Keynesian economics, Judge, is to offset recessions, not to prevent them entirely. That is a radical idea that is not at all possible. How do you respond?
I respond with offset is, in essence, the same exact thing as preventing. If Keynesian economics, thank you, I have a lot to get through, you can sit down. If Keynesian economics was successful at all, then recessions would have occurred. If the theory behind Keynesian economics is by taking government spending and stimulating the economy, and a recession would never occur, that stimulus would have carried out indefinitely. And that clearly has not happened. See the 9 recessions we've had in the last 60 years. Second, Keynesian economics has caused artificial demand. It's created 20% of government spending, or 20% of the economy, rather, is government spending. And the reason this is bad, and the reason this shows how Keynesian economics has failed, is because this 20% is actually not really stimulus. It's actually money taken out of that 71% and 9%, respectively, from consumer spending and trade deficits. A big key tenet of Keynesian economics is the multiplier effect. And by taking money out of the natural economy and putting it in as government spending, it halts the multiplier effect for that money that is previously consumer spending and previously trade, halts it and starts it when the government spends it. So this is why Keynesian economics has failed, because it prevents this multiplier effect from occurring indefinitely. So they said that not all 20% of government spending is Keynesian, and I would beg to disagree, because whether it be Social Security or healthcare spending or any other type of spending, all this has the purpose of stimulating the economy. All this has the purpose of getting jobs. Healthcare spending, for example, helps doctors out, helps medical staff out. All this is stimulus spending, in effect, and that is the cause of, that is the majority of government spending. And third, I have a lot to get through. The third our third point is deficit spending clearly shows why Keynesian economics has failed, because they said that deficit spending began before the recession. Of course, deficit spending began before the recession. Keynesian economics has been in place for 6 years, and over the last 6 years, if you look at the history of the deficit, it has grown significantly as previous to the implementation of Keynesian economics. And again, as my partner so eloquently pointed out, that this is a bad thing. It shows why Keynesian economics has failed, is because it's actually a direct threat to national security. If we look at Greece went bankrupt because they had such a large deficit. And you may argue that the United States has a great credit score, but that's not going to end. That's not going to happen forever. I mean, and Keynesian economics has, in essence, caused this deficit and inflated this deficit simply because of government spending. I would like to move on to their case. They said that their first reason is that banks are posting profits. This is clearly a reason why Keynesian economics has worked, because it's gotten us out of this recession. It's really gotten us out of the recession. There are two things that measure when we're in a recession. Number one, unemployment. And number two, consumer confidence. Is banks at all in that argument? No, not at all. This just because banks are posting profits does not show an example of why Keynesian economics has not failed. Moving on to their second point, they said that Keynesian economics protects us. I would like to go back to this point, or to our definition of Keynesian economics, that is monetary policy in order to offset recessions and stimulate demand. Regulatory policy has nothing to do with Keynesian economics at all. This point has no weight in this debate. And again, so for all these reasons, I would strongly urge a vote in favor of the proposition team, because Keynesian economics has clearly failed for the three reasons above. Thank you.
Before moving on to the definitions, the opposition's own case, and then back to the proposition's case, I'd just like to thank the judge and, of course, everyone in the room. Now, moving on to the definitions, the proposition team got up here and defined Keynesian as government spending, and then in their second speech expanded upon it, saying that, no, we're talking about government spending for the reasons of stimulation, stimulating the economy in order to, during tough economic times. And we agree. Both teams agree. Keynesian economics should be when the government spends money to stimulate the economy, and therefore all of their points about how, the government has spends 20% of our economy, therefore that's Keynesian economics. No, that's not true. Keynesian economics is, as both teams agree, when the government uses money to stimulate, not when the government uses money for, say, an army. Having an army and paying for an army as part of our government is not Keynesian economics, and therefore does not apply in this debate. Moving on to the burdens that both teams brought up. The proposition team tried to put a burden on us as the opposition team, saying that, our burden is to prove how Keynesian economics is a complete success. However, we simply have to show that if Keynesian economics has slowed down our recessions, then therefore it has been successful and it has not failed. And all economists agree. Without the stimulus package of President Obama's, we would be in a worse off situation than we are today. Therefore, because we have offset some of the effects of the recession, therefore this is an example where Keynesian economics does work. We do not have to prove that Keynesian economics is completely successful in the fact that there's no longer a recession. We just simply have to prove that it has not failed. Keep this in mind as I take their first point.
Can you show the logical links to your claim that states that the current government spending has offset the recession, please?
The current well, not only do all economists agree, but let's look at the banks, as is in our first example, or opposition point, stating that because after we stimulated the banks, they started turning profits within a few months after the stimulation. This is a direct result. When we say we have a stimulus, therefore the banks improve. Obviously, this is a direct link showing how Keynesian economics has been successful. Keep that in mind as I take their last point.
Can you explain how recessions and banks' performance are all related?
Well, banks are a key indicator of our economy's success. If banks are doing well, then likely the economy is doing well. It's an indicator. Therefore, when the banks all of a sudden get the stimulus money, when they get help from Keynesian economics, and they do well, that's showing how Keynesian economics is successful and is doing its job. Now, moving to the burden that we placed on the proposition. My partner got up here and said the proposition's job is to uphold the resolution, and today's resolution states Keynesian economics has failed. The proposition ignored this point, meaning that in order for them to win today's debate, they have to prove how not Keynesian economics is failing, not how it's not perfect. They have to show how it has failed. It's a complete failure, and therefore they have not done that if we look throughout today's points. Now, quickly, the judging criteria, all teams agree, weight of examples. So we need to really look at, are these examples impactful? Which I'll do moving on to our first point. The first opposition point was that about the banks. As I've stated before, because of the stimulus money put into banks, within a few months later, after the stimulus plan, after the Keynesian economics were applied, the banks started doing better. They started turning a profit. This is a clear example. There's a clear link there. Money to banks, therefore banks do well. This is a clear link and a clear example and a weighty example that shows how Keynesian economics has not failed. In fact, it has succeeded in doing its job. Now, our second point was that of the deregulation. Now, the proposition team said, oh, well, you're talking about regulation. However, not only is this fiscal policy, which does apply to Keynesian economics, but we're also showing this we're also showing how the free market system, which is the opposite of Keynesian economics, how that has been successful. So if we're able to show how the opposite of Keynesian economics has failed, then we're able to uphold the resolution on its face. Therefore, when we say that because of the deregulation that occurred in 2000, 7 years later, all of a sudden, after we moved to a more free market system, we move away from Keynesian economics and to a free market system, then all of a sudden, 7 years later, we have the Great Recession. Obviously, this is once again a direct link when we can see we move away from Keynesian economics, we go into the worst recession since the Great Depression. So obviously, this is a clear example. And because we're talking about fiscal policy, which is part of the economic policy that is Keynesian. Now, moving on to the proposition's first 3 points. Their first point was about these 9 recessions. Yes, we agree this is bad, but they have no link. When I asked in a POI to the proposition first speaker, I simply asked, what is the benefit? What is the link? How have you shown that because of Keynesian economics, which keeping in mind that the United States does not uphold a strictly Keynesian economic policy, we have a mix of both Keynesian economics and free market system, they haven't showed how the Keynesian economic part of our American fiscal policy has led to the 9 recessions. There's no link in there. All they said was, oh, well, we practice a little bit of Keynesian economics, and there were 9 recessions, therefore Keynesian economics has failed. No, it doesn't work like that. They haven't shown the link, the direct link of cause and effect. They've only said that these 2 things have happened, but they haven't shown the link, and therefore it cannot win on this point, which is their only example throughout today's debate, because their second point was about the 20% of government spending, which I already covered, saying that yes, the United States economy is based 20% on government spending. However, this is not Keynesian spending. Keynesian spending would be stimulus like the President Obama's stimulus package 2 years ago. This would not be the government spending money on welfare, on food stamps, on the army. These are all programs that the government does to protect its citizens. As the proposition team member said himself, oh, well, this is not really stimulus. He's exactly right. Because this is not really stimulus money, therefore, it's not Keynesian and it does not apply to today's debate. Their third and final point was about, oh, well, Greece has a deficit, and look where that landed them. However, Greece does not have a Keynesian economics policy. They have an irresponsible fiscal policy. When they're paying teachers more months than they earn, obviously something is wrong, and therefore this is not Keynesian. So for all these reasons, we have shown examples with direct links between why Keynesian economic policies have not failed, and the proposition team has not shown how it has failed. And therefore, we ask for the judge's vote. Thank you.